Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my co-host, Jeff Mack, Newmark Knight Frank, Drew Hanlon, Frank Hennessy, Premier Planning, Ben Drummond, D2 Integrated Solutions, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, and Mitchell Lightman, Exact Payroll. Jeffrey, can you give us a rundown on who's on the show today, please?
Sure, Herb. Happy to. We have Keith Harad, President of Arway Linen and Uniform Rentals, J.M. Hasson, President and CEO of Ameriscend, Colleen Arnold, President of Aqua, and Misha Galperin is the CEO of the National Museum of American Jewish History.
Well, let's get to know our first guest, Keith Harad, President of Arway Linen and Uniform Rentals. Keith, what is Arway Linen and Uniform Rentals? What are you guys doing?
We are a company. We're a commercial laundry that we lease linen to restaurants, the F&B industry.
Mm-hmm. And how large or how small is this organization, and how'd you get a job with it?
The organization, we have approximately, prior to COVID, 150 people. I started the company with my partner almost 42 years ago. And
where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
I'm originally from the Feltonville section of the city. I have an older sister who's approximately 9 years older, and a brother approximately 5 years older.
And for those folks that are listening in Arizona and other parts of the country, Feltonville are row homes in Philadelphia. And it's not the fanciest, danciest of neighborhoods. Drew.
Yeah, Keith, what was the first time you started a business when you were younger?
The first time was I was involved with my partner where we sold T-shirts outside of concerts in the Philadelphia area.
Wow, what was that? What do you remember most about that experience?
It was fun. It was a hustle. We enjoyed the activity among people, and we made our own T-shirts with a heat press machine.
And what do you bring to work every day from that experience?
The entrepreneurship of being in business and also dealing with the public.
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey?
Keith, tell us a little bit about mom and dad growing up, if you would.
Unfortunately, my dad died when I was 9 years old, and I didn't have a whole lot of contact with him. And then my mom passed away when I was 16.
Tell us about the dynamic of that, and what did that do to you, Keith?
It took away some of my childhood, and it made me become a very independent-minded person at a much earlier stage in life.
Mm-hmm. And you were the youngest, so you kind of grew up quick.
Yeah, I grew up real quick.
Mitchell?
Keith, as a follow-up, how did that experience as a young man or an adolescent affect your success and what you're doing?
It made me want to be able to be successful in life. Maybe it gave me a little obsession to move forward in an independent-minded way.
Mm-hmm. Frank?
So at a young age, Keith, you were basically in self-preservation mode. So what or who role modeled that survival instinct in you?
I guess I took it from within. And I had, some very close friendships, especially with my partner. I also met my wife at a very early age. And I met good people, and it became successful that way.
How's that experience shape you keep satisfied clients for 20, 30, 40 years?
Because of the type of service that I provide for people and the relationships that I established, and the majority of my employees have been with me for 20 plus years.
Mm-hmm. Ben?
Keith, I know your father passed when you were 9. Do you have any memory of what he was doing for work and your experience of that as a child?
Yes, he was ironically in the dry cleaning business. And one of his locations was around the corner for where my operation is today. So I remember being on the truck with him.
And riding around on the truck with your father when he was in the dry cleaning business, what's that got to do with you building and running this linen business?
It really doesn't, but it just fell into that way because I didn't plan on being in this industry. I graduated college and it became a probation officer initially.
You became a probation officer.
Correct.
Uh-huh. So what got you started in this business with it was 150 people?
My cousin, I decided I didn't want to stay in that field, for monetary reasons. My cousin worked for the Jewish Vocational Services, and there was a job with the linen supply company, and that's how I got started.
Mm-hmm. Matthew?
Keith, what were you doing for fun when you were a kid, 8 to 14?
I enjoyed sports. I went to overnight camp, which was a federation camp, SGF. So I spent a lot of time in youth organizations and so forth. And
what sports did you like?
Mainly basketball, but I played them all, basketball, football, and baseball.
And was that largely organized or just out on the street with the kids in the neighborhood?
A combination of both, because where I grew up, we played a lot in the streets.
So out in the streets, what was your role? Did you just show up when there were already enough kids and wait for your turn to play?
I was normally one of the more aggressive type, more the leadership type personalities in that formation.
How did you show that leadership type personality back there when you were a little kid on the streets?
Just trying to organize. I played quarterback and try to structure the games accordingly.
And what's that got to do with what you're doing today?
Kind of similar. I'm very organized as far as people skills are concerned. I brought in people to help me with analytics now in the future because I'm not very well with that. But I'm a very good people person. Ironically, my business is in the same zip code that I grew up with, so I'm very well attached to the area.
When you talk about being a people person and the people being important, I want to make sure I get this right. Was your partner with the T-shirts back when you were a kid is your first partner with the business too, or do you have lots of partners, or which is it?
No, he initially was in the T-shirt business before me, but we've been together since we're 17 and close friends since then.
How do you keep your close friend as your business partner? How's that work?
Well, we keep our wives out of the conversations.
No, come on. You guys have a good relationship to have lasted this long. Tell me about that relationship.
It's been very good. We kind of we're very well tuned to each other. We don't argue about issues. We handle different aspects of the business, and it's worked out very well for us that way.
Mm-hmm.
What would your partner say is your strongest asset in the business?
People skills.
Mm-hmm. So what do you remember about working with your dad, Keith?
Just driving around the truck. He was very just spending some time with him that way. I don't really have that much memory of it.
What did you enjoy about that? Why did you want to do that with your dad?
Yeah, I kind of sat in the middle on a milk crate, and my brother was in the other seat, so it was kind of fun just bouncing around on the truck.
What do you mean you were sitting on a milk crate?
Well, in those days, there was two seats in the truck, and in the middle, there was nothing there, so he put a milk crate there for me to sit on. There wasn't seat belts then. Oh,
there were no seat belts. Uh-huh. And what's all that stuff have to do with what you're doing nowadays with 150 people, this business, Arway Linen and Uniform Rentals?
It really is not related to that, but based on the
what
fact
part of it is related?
That it is a laundry type setting, except we do different. His was home delivery for personal wear, ours are tablecloths, uniforms, and so forth.
Uh-huh. And so you're the kind of guy that really goes in deep and really enjoys and appreciates long-term relationships. The fact that the business is located where originally where you lived, where your father's business was. You have long-term partners. You're an old-fashioned kind of entrepreneurial businessman, aren't you? Delivering what you sell what you deliver, don't lie, that kind of stuff.
Correct. And I have established most of the long-term relationships with a lot of key people in the industry in Philadelphia, meaning the Neil Steins, the Jose Garces, and people of that nature that have been in the industry for a long time.
Mm-hmm. So with you, a contract, it's okay to sign one, but that's not, your word is your bond. Am I picking that up right?
Unfortunately, today is much different that way. We used to do business on a handshake. Someone like George Perrier, it was done that way.
So you believe there's trust in business. You can really trust certain people, people. Correct.
Uh-huh. Why does it matter to you that you had so many employees who worked for you for so long?
It just shows that they have trust in me and their future and so forth, and I take a lot of pride in that. Probably one of the few companies out there that still provides 100% health care for my employees, because I just feel it's important.
Well, what's the website address for this organization known as Arway Linen and Uniform Rentals, Keith?
It's Arway, ARWAY, linen and uniform rentals.com.
We've been speaking with Keith Harad, who's the president of Arway Linen and Uniform Rentals here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders, executiveleadersradio.com. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break.
You now can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your advisors. Yes, this radio and online social media exposure is free and quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors.
We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce J.M. Hasson, who's the president and CEO of Ameriscend. J.M., what is Ameriscend? What are you guys doing?
Ameriscend is a packaging-focused family of companies comprised of 4 businesses that has developed through acquisition over the past 10 years.
And where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
I'm from suburban Philadelphia in a town called Gwinnett Valley, and I'm the oldest of 3.
Mm-hmm. And tell me, what do you do? What do you do different than your founding partners? What do you bring to the party different?
So my founding partners, the other 2 are accountants, and I'm more in an engineering and operational role. And
didn't you tell me that you were earning sweat equity in this business?
Yes. Yeah. I'm definitely the sweat equity partner. Mm-hmm. And
How young were you when you were earning sweat equity?
I was about 10, and I was sweating my tail off cutting lawns.
Mm-hmm. You were about 10 years old, and you were making money, huh? Okay. Jeffrey, give me a hand.
JM, tell us about mom and dad. What were they doing when you were growing up as professions?
So I grew up in a nice family. My father is an engineer by background. My mother is a homemaker.
Which one are you more like?
Probably more like my father.
And what did you learn from your dad? You were telling us something about he had some dreams for you, but you tell us about that.
Yeah, he was a hard worker. He put himself through night school, and he went on to get an MBA also through night school. So just a busy, hardworking, salt of the earth person.
Mm-hmm. You wanted you to be dad? Did you bring to work every day?
I'm sorry?
What do you get from dad you bring to work every day?
Hard work, optimism, entrepreneurial spirit.
Mm-hmm. Drew?
Yeah, you mentioned that you moved kind of school to school growing up. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I never started and completed the same school. We moved quite a bit, but I thought, looking back on it now, I learned a lot of valuable lessons about how to meet people, how to integrate myself.
And what do you bring from that experience to work with you every day?
For me, I think I use it regularly, especially with employees, trying to create a culture where everybody feels like they belong, that they're valued, and that their contributions matter.
You said before that you had an awareness that people really wanted to belong. Where did that come from?
I think just the difficulty in moving from grade school, high school, college. It feels better when you feel like people want you and you belong.
Mm-hmm. So you have a real deep sensitivity to this in terms of building a team because you've experienced the wanting this, haven't you?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Matthew?
Yeah, Jam, when you sat around the dining room table with your siblings and your parents, tell me what was going on. What were you guys talking about?
Well, we were fortunate that we had dinner every night. We would talk about things that were the news of the day, sports, anything, just a lot of open and honest conversation.
And what did you learn from those conversations? What did you get from it?
I think I learned an awful lot. I think it exposed me to just the way that people think, how you can learn a lot from just observing and listening.
Do you learn a lot from observing and listening in your role at Ameriscend?
I believe I do, yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, I think I find a lot of value in the variety of roles and responsibilities that people have, and everybody comes with a different perspective. And I'm interested in hearing the perspective and learning from it and hopefully incorporating good ideas.
Mm-hmm. Frank? Well, Frank, you're on mute there.
Sorry about that. JM, you said your father wanted you to be an engineer, and I feel like to some extent you did that, but yet you had a entrepreneurship within you at an early age. So did you conform or did you not conform?
So I think I conformed by becoming an engineer, but I always had an ambition, probably from the time I was 16, to want to own my own business.
What has that experience taught you about attracting and retaining companies and employees today?
So I think it's taught me an awful lot. We have grown through acquisition. So when you buy a business, there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's important that people understand they're valued. When you're buying the business, yes, it's a business, but the business is comprised of people. And for us to be successful, we need to retain the talent that the business has to offer.
How do you make people feel valuable?
I think I'm very open and honest. I'm really approachable. And I genuinely enjoy being around people and creating an environment where they can achieve their dreams.
Mm-hmm. Ben?
JM, tell us about the sports you were playing, and not just the sports, but what positions were you playing in those sports?
Yeah, so I played sports all the way through high school. I played baseball and football principally. I was a pitcher and a quarterback.
So you were a pitcher and a quarterback, kind of the leadership position on a team activity. What's that got to do with you running this business?
So I think I learned an awful lot. I was humbled many times on the field, but also recognized that everybody has a role to play. And the leader may not necessarily be the best athlete on the field, but if you surround yourself with good people who have talent in their respective roles, the team does quite well. And that's really my job now, is to give people the opportunity to make the most of the contributions they make daily.
Mm-hmm. Mitchell?
You mentioned that when you were 16, you knew you wanted to be in your own business. Tell us kind of, what happened to get you on the path that you took to get where you are today.
I think I was just an observant young person, and I was fortunate to be in an area where I had a lot of neighbors and family friends who owned businesses, and they just seemed to have opportunities and lifestyles and happiness that I wanted to emulate.
And what do you attribute to the motivation that it took to get you where you are today?
A lot of persistence, a willingness to fail and pick myself up, and just a lot of self-reflection.
How young were you when you started making money, JM?
About 10.
What were you doing?
I was mowing lawns, shoveling driveways.
Whose idea was it?
Probably mine. I needed money. I like Burger King, and I couldn't afford it, so I needed money to go there and buy what I wanted.
So the family didn't give you money?
Some. I mean, my parents were generous. I'm not trying to paint that kind of a picture, but I was encouraged to make my own money.
So you felt good about being able to make your own money?
Absolutely.
So you were mowing lawns when you were 10. What happened at 11, 12, 13, 14? When was the first time you got some sort of a part-time job?
I was probably closer to 14, 15.
What was that?
I was a dishwasher.
Where were you a dishwasher?
I was a dishwasher at Gwynedd Mercy College.
Mm-hmm. What'd you do different than all the other kids that had that job?
I don't know that I did anything different. I think I just I tried to show up on time and do a good job and make my bosses happy.
So you were trying to be reliable and dependable.
Yeah, absolutely. I take pride in that. I think I'm one who.
You think that's why you're the operating partner in this business?
I do. Yeah. I don't mind blocking and tackling.
Well, it sounds like you set a good example for everybody else. Am I correct about that?
I try to lead by example.
Where'd you get the example from? Who led you by example?
I think my parents, for sure, teachers, coaches. I've been fortunate. I was surrounded by a lot of good people that gave me a lot of good life lessons.
Well, it sounds to me like you tried to absorb those lessons. It sounds to me like you're like a lifetime learner, like talking around the dinner table, enjoying everybody's perspective. It sounds to me like you really do try to encourage everybody to input, and you really do appreciate and respect everybody's opinion. You don't mind getting in the middle, though, like you were the quarterback. What's the website address for your organization?
Ameriscend.com, Ameriscend.com.
We've been speaking with J.M. Hasson, President and CEO of Ameriscend, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Colleen Arnold, president of Aqua. Colleen, what is Aqua? What are you guys doing?
Aqua is a water division of Essential Utilities. We serve water and wastewater services to over 3 million people in 8 states, and I manage about 1,200 employees.
Wow. Where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
Staten Island, New York, one of 6. I was 5th.
All righty. And how young were you when you started making money?
I babysat maybe it was around 11, 12, and then my first job was in a video store at 13.
Mm-hmm. What did you do different than all the other kids that were working in that video store?
I think I really engaged with the customers. You know, it wasn't just a job. I enjoyed meeting people and serving people, and you get all walks of life, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. So you engaged at the age of 14, working in that video store with the customers, with the people. What's your ability to engage have to do with your role? It says you're the president of Aqua.
Yeah, putting customers first, right? Our mission is to provide reliable, safe water. It's a human public health. And so always trying to remember and connect with customers and wear the hat if it was my grandma drinking that water or a close friend. Never forgetting that.
Jeffrey?
Colleen, you grew up in Staten Island, surrounded by water, but you told us a story about your dad being a regional sales manager for a shipping company, and he took you to dinners with him with clients. What did you learn from your dad?
I learned again, he was very charismatic, and as much as he was in sales, you wouldn't know he was doing sales when we were at these dinners. And so I learned again that importance of engaging and connecting with people first, and then getting to, what you're going to try and find solutions for together.
What do you take to work every day that you learn from your dad? What is he saying to you at Aqua?
He valued, he passed away a few years ago, but what I take with him is the value of education and learning. And that no matter what situation you're in, whether you're working at a video store or volunteering, learning and connecting with people.
Ben?
Colleen, you grew up playing soccer on a soccer team. What was that experience like?
Well, I played soccer for 1 year in high school as I, convinced by my friends to just try it. I wasn't the most naturally athletic person, but loved it. I loved being with my friends and the school spirit part of it.
That's interesting. So for that 1 year playing soccer, you mentioned that you weren't the most athletic person. What did you learn through that on that team?
That anyone can contribute, and that just being part of a team and a good friend counts for something.
And how do you bring that?
Whoa. Frankie?
Go ahead.
Colleen, I'm curious, how young were you when you first started thinking about the environment?
I thought about it in high school. As a senior, I had a major journalism project about Staten Island and development, and when you look at the environment there, how maybe development could have been better.
Why was that important to you?
I was connected to, again, the water and the services. New York City had some of the best drinking water in the world, and I was always fascinated by the engineering part of these big tunnels. And then Staten Island itself, an island surrounded by water, it just interested me.
Okay, so I get the connection, the environment, and now you're at a water company. But help me understand, you're young, you're a female, you manage 1,200 people, most of whom are men. Where's that confidence? Where's that motivation come from to take on such a huge responsibility?
I've always been good at solving problems and rolling up my sleeves, and no matter what, just trying to help make the situation better. And as much as water industry, water, wastewater can be pretty traditional and conservative, anybody, male or female, just appreciates that you're there, you know what you're doing.
Drew?
Oh, and you said when you had dinner with your dad, that he wasn't really selling. What was the lesson to be learned during that experience of him engaging with a client at dinner?
First, learning where the client is coming from and putting their needs first and trying to find that fit.
And has that been impactful working at Aqua for you?
Yeah, I think it's been impactful in any role I've had.
Mm-hmm. Matthew?
Yeah, Colleen, you're fifth of 6 kids. Are you all evenly spaced apart?
No, the oldest 4 were 1 year apart, and they called them sets of Irish twins. Actually, I think they were 10 or 11 months apart. And then there was a 5-year gap before I came along, and then I have a younger brother.
So that's an interesting spacing. What effect did that have on you growing up as a kid?
We talk about it as 2 regimes. My older brothers and sisters say my younger brother and I are completely spoiled. I would argue with that. But mostly it was seeing them interact, and there was a lot more conflict and strong opinions, and just kind of taking the best of each of them and understanding where people are coming from in conflicts.
So did watching the 4 of them interact and seeing the way those conflicts played out, does that actually help you today as president of Aqua?
Absolutely, right? I think some of the hardest things we do in work is on the relationship side and making it productive. And so being able to understand where conflict starts really helps in managing employees today.
Mitchell?
Colleen, you mentioned in the green room that your first job in a video store really wasn't that influential in your future career. Could you let us know about some sort of event that might have happened that kind of solidified it for you as to this is the direction I'm taking?
Yes, I'm technical and I love the science side. So for a while, I wanted to just be an individual contributor, and I was happy with that. When my older sister passed about 9 years ago, it was a real pivot point for me. And then, something just changed, an epiphany, right? One life to live, and I felt like I could impact more if I started taking a more leadership role.
What changed, Colleen?
Honestly, it was a tough path, and she was dying of cancer with young children. She had raw fear, right? Like probably the scariest thing that, and I felt that with her. And so just something changed, the switch went off. I don't have fear about completely putting myself out there in terms of helping. And I think I can do it in a leadership role.
How have you been able to contribute since the fear switched off?
By leaning in, even applying for, the role that I have now at Aqua has been, I've had a pretty quick path of succession over the last several years. and just putting myself out there. I may not have even have applied for certain roles, but.
What do you bring to work that from your sister every day?
It sounds trite, but again, life is short. Don't sweat the small stuff. You don't think about that at the end. And just every day there's something to improve on.
Yeah, when you're faced with a tough decision at the office, do you think of that?
I do.
What do you think of?
I think of I'm coming from a good place and I have a situation here, and just give your idea. Work with the others, find it, but really put your ideas out there. Don't be afraid to share. Don't be afraid to go to the uncomfortable places.
Matthew?
Colleen, do you try to mentor young women?
I do. At one point I wanted to be a teacher and a professor, and I love teaching, and that's part of mentoring.
So what's the biggest message when you're mentoring a young woman? What's like the biggest message you try to give to them?
Don't worry about being perfect. Don't think you have to check every box before you can fulfill a role or put yourself out there. You have a lot to give, and just start trying to fill those holes and offer what you have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
What really lights your fire about what you do, Colleen, every day? What's your favorite part of your job?
Probably sounds common too, but the people that I work with, we are united in our mission, and that really fires me up. We care about all our customers, but working together collectively on that mission across the country. I love going to the 8 different states, and again, being united by mission. I love who I work with.
What's the website address for Aqua?
AquaAmerica.com.
We've been speaking with Colleen Arnold, president of Aqua, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Let me have that website address one more time.
Aqua, AQUA, America, all one word, .com.
We've been speaking with Colleen Arnold, president of Aqua, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, that's executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, we'll be back in a moment right after this quick break.
Recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, Executive Leaders Radio. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable. Yes, this radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors for free exposure.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, and we'd like to introduce Misha Galperin, CEO of the National Museum of American Jewish History. Misha, what is the National Museum of American Jewish History?
The museum is a place where the story of America and America's struggle and striving for freedom is told through the eyes of one particular ethnic and religious group, the Jewish community. It's visited by about 1 million people online this past year, and usually about 150,000 come through during the regular year.
All righty. Where are you from originally, and how many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
I was brought up in the Soviet Union, part that is now called Ukraine, and I was the oldest of 2.
Mm-hmm. And how young were you when you came to the United States?
I was 18.
Mm-hmm. Drew?
Misha, what do you remember most about coming to the United States?
I remember the variety of choices one had in this country and how overwhelming it was for somebody who grew up in a place like I did. 16 different types of coffee in one supermarket shelf.
And didn't you say the personality of the people was also different?
Yeah, I was very taken by the fact that everybody seemed to be smiling at me. Looked like idiots, frankly, because we don't smile in the Soviet Union.
And how has that experience changed you today?
It taught me how to approach people in a different way and how to try to understand them and relate to them as individuals and not to their masks.
Jeffrey?
Misha, you came to this country with your parents, your grandmother, and your sister. Tell us about mom and dad, and what do they do for a living?
My dad was a scientist because he couldn't be a writer, which is what he wanted to be. And my mother was an electrical engineer. My grandmother was a chamber dancer.
Who are you more like, Misha, your mom or dad?
I'm probably most like my two grandfathers. One was a physician and another one was a rabbi.
And what do you take to work every day at the museum that you learn from one of them or both of them?
Kindness and intensity from one and from the other. Being really genuine with people and being very focused and intense about the things that I do.
Matthew?
Misha, why did your family come to the United States?
Well, we're trying to to go to a place where you can think freely, talk freely, and make those choices freely.
And that's fascinating to me. How young were you when you knew you weren't able to think and talk freely in the Soviet Union?
I think my first experience was when I was 9 years old. I came back from school and told my father that I was outraged that the Israeli aggressors who attacked our socialist Arab brethren in 1967. And my father explained to me what he couldn't until then about who we were, where we came from, and what the school was trying to do versus what was real.
And what happened after that at the school?
Well, I came back next day with a poem I had written, which was entitled "I Am a Hebrew," and I got expelled, and my parents got a talking to from their bosses in their jobs.
And that's such a heavy experience for a 9-year-old. What did you learn from that? What do you take from that experience?
What I took is that things that are on surface are not always what they really are, and that you need to understand things on a lot deeper level.
In light of that story, what did you do for fun or for a hobby when you were that age?
I had a bunch of different hobbies, but the thing I love to do the most is read. And I read so much that I even did this under the blanket with a flashlight at night when I was supposed to be asleep.
Why under the blanket with a flashlight?
What were you reading, Misha?
Yeah.
Well, I under the blanket because I was hiding from my parents who wanted me to get some sleep. And the other reason is that I was reading stuff that was forbidden, that you couldn't get and you couldn't tell others that you had.
What kind of stuff were you reading?
About Jewish history primarily, both modern and past, about where my people came from.
Really? What's that have to do with what you're doing nowadays?
Oh, I don't know. The American Museum of National and American Jewish History, that may have something to do with it. Although that's not where I started, but that's where I ended up.
Mm-hmm. Ben?
Misha, where did this passion for history and world relations, specifically in your youth, come from?
It's very hard for me to tell. I mean, as a kid, before I was 8 or 9 years old, I remember playing at Greek mythology with my friends, heroes and gods and kings and, Hercules and Theseus and Zeus and all that sort of stuff. And then when I learned I was Jewish and what it meant, it moved to this other piece of me, and I became interested in Jewish history, although I'm interested in history altogether.
How about that? Frank?
Misha, can you explain the most significant cultural differences between the Soviet Union, where you grew up, and the U.S.?
There are too many to mention, but I would say that this issue of dealing with the freedom of choice is most significant, I think, because where I was growing up in the Soviet Union, there was a right way to think and a wrong way to think, the right way to say things and the wrong way to say things. What I love about this country is the tolerance, the democracy, the ability to be yourself, the ability to disagree with others without being their enemy.
So now that you came to the U.S. at 18, how did it impact you to be able to think and act freely as what was natural to you?
To some extent, it was overwhelming, because all of a sudden I could do what I basically chose to do and what I wanted. But it also opened it up for me, and I became free. And one of the things that happened to me throughout my life is that I'm actually in my third career. Something that would have been unthinkable in the former Soviet Union.
Jeffrey?
So, Misha, you mentioned earlier that you're a clinical psychologist by profession. How do you work with that skill in being the director of the museum?
First time I took an executive job after many years of private practice, my training analyst asked me how many board members I had. I said 60. He said, I always knew we were going to have a bigger practice than I. So I think in a non-for-profit world in particular, I think it's very hard to do any job without being a psychologist. Because, it's about motivation. It's about why people do the things that they do. It's about connecting with them on a level that is intimate and personal. In fundraising or in other things, somebody once said to me that fundraising is similar to sex. It's so intimate and it's so personal that unless you can actually understand how that works, it's hard to do it.
So, Misha, what are you most proud of that you've accomplished in your life so far and what you're doing today?
Well, without a doubt, my most proud of having 4 wonderful children, ages 14 to 32, and my first grandchild. But I think I would say that I fulfilled my father's dream. In coming here from the Soviet Union, which is something he really wanted and fought for and sacrificed for. And I think he's pretty proud looking back.
Why do you think you fulfilled your father's dream? How do you think he'd feel if he knew what you were doing now, which is the CEO of the National Museum of American Jewish History?
My father was orphaned when he was the age of 6. In front of his eyes, his entire family, his father, the rabbi, and everyone else was murdered by the Nazis in a ravine in the Ukraine. And he survived as an orphan, and he took his family out of the Soviet Union for the opportunity for them to practice their religion and be free. And, he now has a son who is running the National Museum of American Jewish History.
Wow.
There's your answer, Herb.
Misha, what did it feel like when you were a kid and you learned kind of out of nowhere that you were Jewish? It was like a huge piece of your identity and your life was dropped on you. What'd that feel like?
Very weird, because up until then, the word Jewish and anything associated with it, the only way I've heard is in a derogatory sense. I mean, it surrounded me, and I even once had a fight with another kid who called me that, and I fought not because I was insulted for being Jewish. I fought because I thought he was calling me something I was not. So to discover that was amazing, but also it allowed me to discover what it meant to be part of the Jewish people and all that we have done and accomplished.
And Misha, what is the website address for the National Museum of American Jewish History?
It's the first letters of the name. It's NMAJH.org, namaj.org, National Museum of American Jewish History.org.
We've been speaking with Misha Galperin, CEO of the National Museum of American Jewish History here on Executive Leaders Radio. Jeffrey, can you give us a rundown on who else we've had on the show today, please?
What a great show, Herb. Keith Harad, President, Arway Linen and Uniform Rentals. J.M. Hasson, President and CEO of Ameriscend. Colleen Arnold, President of Aqua. And Misha Galperin, CEO, National Museum of American Jewish History.
I would like to thank my co-hosts, including Mr. Jeff Mack, Newmark Knight Frank, Drew Hanlon, Frank Hennessy, Premier Planning, Ben Drummond, D2 Integrated Solutions, Mr. Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, and Mitchell Lightman, Exact Payroll, for giving me a hand structuring the questions. Hope you're providing our listening audience an educational and entertaining show. I'd like to thank our listening audience for listening. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a radio show. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. Thank you for joining us today, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.